Hello, everyone. I'm very surprised that so many people have attended here. Really happy. Thanks for your trust. Thanks for your support for the Rails Architects Conference. First of all, let me check that all the technical stuff is working. So please let me know about whether you can hear me, whether the sound is fine, whether the video is fine, whether there are some interruptions. I know there are some people watching from Facebook, so let me know from Facebook if it's fine, and from YouTube, and maybe from Twitter. I'm not sure if this integration works fine. So I'll wait a moment, and we are starting. I just want to ensure everything is fine. More than 100 people already. Wow. Sounds good. Thank you, Jason. That's perfect. Okay, let me know if there are any issues. I will try to watch the comments, but meanwhile, I will start not to make any delay here. So I will switch to the full screen. I hope it will catch it right. All works here. Thank you, Piotr. Okay, so let me switch to the full screen. All right, so now I'm in the situation that I don't see myself, but I can see my slides. Hopefully you can see both me and the slides. Please let me know if it works for you, and I will get a ping from my friends if it doesn't work. But okay, let's get over it. And first of all, welcome to the Rails Architects Conference. Really happy that you have joined. Was a very, in a way, this was a very spontaneous decision to organize this conference. You know, we all ended up in this online situation where it's easier to do stuff online, and we wanted to create a series of webinars. It ended up as a series of talks for a conference. So just a quick reminder, there are amazing talks prepared. So my talk is actually probably, I will try to do my best, but I probably, the other ones are better. So tomorrow we have Tomek with multi-tenancy, amazing and important topic in the Rails world. Then we have the problem of painless Rails upgrades, and Szymon is one of the people who spent really hours, weeks, maybe months doing that on a huge application, so he knows what to tell. And then we have Rails views from Mirek, something that I will touch on today, but Mirek will go much in depth on how to create fast reports, for example, for Rails applications. And then we have Tomek Stolarczyk and me together. We will do a code review from a coupling and cohesion point of view, very important topics as well. And then on Monday, I will have a wrapping talk, wrapping the whole conference. All right, so my talk is about how to properly start your next application. So that's a very strong promise here. I really believe that Rails is a great fun, and today my talk is kind of, in a way, a summary of 16 years of my Rails experience, because I started in 2004, I fell in love in Rails, and then I hated Rails, and then I loved it again, and I hated it again. So now after 16 years, I would say the status is complicated, and my current belief is that Rails is great, but we need to use it in the right way. So when we start Rails, it's amazing. We smile. Everything is optimized for the programmer's happiness at the level of Ruby, at the level of Rails. We know all of that. However, at the beginning it's great, but after 3 months, things are starting to be a little bit more complicated. So the features that used to take us 1 day of work, now suddenly they take 3 days of work. So 3 months is the period of time where things are no longer so easy with Rails. But that's still okay, because when you compare it to Rails after 1 year, it's very often a facepalm. And maybe I'm biased here, because as RKNC, we specialize in helping in big legacy Rails applications. So it's not uncommon for us to work on 12 or 13 years old Rails applications, and we try to put them back in shape. So we've probably seen everything, and I've seen everything. I probably reviewed like hundreds of Rails applications. And I can say that some bad things are happening sometimes, especially when it comes to modularity. The main slogan of Rails is convention over configuration, and this is well known. I think many of us here are proud of this slogan. We share this within other communities, and because it makes us so productive. And this is why Rails is so amazing in the first 3 months, I believe. But this comes with problems, I would say. So the My statement for today is probably very controversial. I hope you will not be offended about that, but I believe it's not really convention, it's coupling. And coupling means that when two elements in the code are coupled, it means that when you're changing one of them, there is a high risk that the second element will be affected. And this is not always the sign of a good design. So while we optimize for convention, for happiness at the beginning, we are doing this for a longer term is a problem. And this is only a problem if you are in the Rails infected ecosystem of gems, where all the external gems, they connect to ActiveRecord usually, so they hook into ActiveRecord, and then at some really, really subtle situations, they will break. An example, so everything that makes us faster in the first 3 months in the Rails world is also slowing us later. I'm not sure if you share this belief, but that's what I see in the big projects. So adding a new gem in the second week of Rails development is easy. No one sees the drawbacks. It's an obvious scenario. But then 8 months later, someone spends 2 or 3 days fixing a really weird bug which is connected to this gem. And maybe not the gem alone, but maybe some other gem is kind of affecting the whole situation. So it's always a very complicated scenario. And sometimes we feel like we need to be like connecting hundreds of pieces in our minds just in order to develop a very simple feature for our application. So we are taking a technical debt, and as in every debt, we need to pay it or declare bankruptcy. And bankruptcy in the Rails world means we need to do a rewrite. Some examples, some basic examples. I don't want to go too much into detail about the couplings. I suppose you understand the idea. For example, that when you in the controller action you assign the evar, the instance variable items, it magically appears in the views, which means both the controller and the view, they are coupled together. So when you're changing the controller, you are at the risk of breaking the view, and vice versa. This is the legendary. This is kind of the whole foundation of Rails, that we have the auto mapping from database columns to ActiveRecord attributes. From what I see in the Rails project, no one ever renames Rails attributes, because it's like the database tables attributes at the database level, because at the Rails level, you have no idea how to detect what has broken, and unless you have some really good test coverage, because just adding one attribute means that your ActiveRecord object, or renaming that a bunch, like dozens, if not hundreds of ActiveRecord methods, they change their API because they no longer exist, because they rely on the data, on the column name. So this is very, very dangerous. Implicit render is probably the less important coupling, but still it exists. And if you were ever in a Rails project where you wanted to regroup how your views are organized, or your controllers, maybe you want to namespace them, suddenly, if you don't have a good test coverage, things will break, and you will only learn from the production exceptions, because they rely on the naming of the views and the naming of the controllers, on the directory with the ref. So we're using the strongest possible coupling in Rails, where even in what directory things live, this will impact how the API is constructed. So this is really, really, in one way, this is a convention, and it's great because it makes us faster. In another way, it's very difficult to say what is the API of certain layers in our application. Let's imagine we are building a restaurant application as Rails developers. So let's imagine a real-world situation. We're presented with some specifications, some requirements, some analysis maybe was done, and we are presented with such reports. I will just make sure everything is working fine. And as Rails developers, when we see such views, those are reports, and those are sale reports from left to right. Variance report is more like inventory report, so whatever belongs to the restaurant. Then we have expenses report and CRM report. So all those reports are important, and I just borrowed those screenshots from POS's system. I'm in no way connected to them. I'm not saying that they are a good example or bad example. Actually, the reports look fine to me. I just want to say that when we as Rails developers see such screens, we are already infected. We already kind of know how we will build the Rails code base. So let me see if I guess it, because our modeling techniques, modeling not as in ActiveRecord models, but modeling as representing the abstraction from the real world in the code base maybe, our modeling techniques are very, very limited, because they are usually like has many belongs to has one. And it's really not even object-oriented modeling, it's more like database-oriented modeling, right? Because those are just taken from the database level and put up to the code base level. So when we are limited to such modeling techniques, our representation in the code will always be different than the real world, and this may cause some problems. And I wonder if you've ever been to a situation where, so this would be like a restaurant implemented by Rails developers. This is obviously just part of it. There will be validations, there will be callbacks, there will be some query methods, maybe some scopes. But as I noticed in Rails projects, almost always there is the user class being huge, the God class. User object will have, for example, 50 attributes at the database level, and very often is using device or some other framework, because we start with device and then we just keep adding attributes, right? So how do we get to 50 attributes one by one? Like if there is already 40 attributes, what's the problem adding 41st attribute, right? So the user class is very often the biggest one in terms of lines of code and complexity, and the one that the application is about. So if you have a project management application, there would be a project class which would be huge in the Rails application. And if we have a restaurant application like here, the restaurant object, the restaurant class would be huge, right? I think you will agree with me here. And imagine that you built this restaurant application, you followed the screenshots, you followed the screens, the flows, and so on. And in the end, no one wants to use it. So it went to production, maybe after 6 months, maybe after 1 year. It went to production, and people don't like it. They don't want to use it. They actually hate it. The waiters, the bartenders, the chef in the kitchen, everyone who was meant to use this application, they don't want to use it. And this is painful. This is obviously a problem for everyone. Not anyone, like no one is happy. The client is actually angry. They paid you. Maybe it's not totally not your fault as a developer because you were presented with a specification. You just followed it, and then your salespeople are trying to rescue the situation. They go and they try to convince the market, the restaurants, that it's actually okay to use it. And then they come back and they tell you, well, the application, we can rescue this, but we actually really need to redesign the application. And it's not just a small refactoring. It's more like really need to change the flow of the screens, because people hate the idea of typical Rails forms, for example. And they come back and as a developer, when you look at it, you see, oh my God, this is like a completely different application. It's completely new. Even though you implemented a restaurant application, they present you with an idea of another restaurant application, completely different. So maybe actually what they want is a rewrite, but who's gonna pay for that? So this is really an unhappy situation to be in at all levels, even if you are legally secured and you will not pay for all of that. No one wants to be there, right? But I've seen this situation sometimes is happening, right? Probably more than we would want to, especially at the startups level and so on. So this is a nightmare to be in such a situation, especially when you see the new requirements and you see a new code base, and it's like, oh my God, this is something completely different, because your code base was so infected with the UI that now it will be like really big part of work. So yeah, so the changes are required, but the code is too coupled to make it easy change and secure change without breaking all the stuff. And just to make it a funny joke, the original developers, they probably left already because they are so disappointed, or they hated the code base so much that it's a typical in the project life cycle that some developers will leave, because that's the easiest way to improve the code you work on. You just leave and change the company. Let's imagine this from a different scenario. Let's look at it from the business perspective. What is important in the business, in a restaurant business? So we'll focus on these restaurant examples. And I've chosen this example because I suppose many of you are familiar with, how restaurants work. They don't have really that complicated business models. And you can probably visualize what we are talking about here. So one important situation in the life cycle of a restaurant, or maybe the life cycle of a day in a typical restaurant, is that a guest enters the restaurant. So I found this stock photo. Someone is looking at the door and they're entering the restaurant. And what does it mean for the restaurant, like for the business processes within restaurants? I wonder if you ever thought about the situation, like what exactly is happening, what are the processes of the restaurant? So maybe there's an entrance, a smaller room or a smaller area where you are supposed to wait because someone will come and they will ask you for how many people you want the table, or maybe they will give you something to drink, or maybe you will need to sit and wait because there's a queue. So sometimes they have like that. Then there's a dining room where people are seated at the tables. Somewhere there's a kitchen, obviously, and there is a bar with drinks. So when a guest enters the restaurant, it does have some impact. Someone needs to come and invite the guest. Someone needs to lead them to a table. So there's like a whole business process. It's very simple. It's actually very trivial in a way. It's very manual, very human-oriented. There is not much you can automate. But you can support those manual processes. So maybe you have some sensors that detect when people enter, and those sensors, they send some signals to the main application, and the main application can, I don't know, put some notification on the watch of the waiters or something like that. I'm just guessing, I'm just making this up, but it is an important situation that the guest enters the restaurant. And the business goal of this situation is that we want to end this small business process with the goal that people are seated at the table. That's the first success for a restaurant. People are seated at the table. When they are seated at the table, the next business process, very human-oriented again, is that we want the guest to confirm the order. So there will be a conversation, there will be a menu being offered. People will take some time to look at the menu. They will maybe ask some questions to the waiter, and some of this stuff will happen and end with a successful scenario that a guest has confirmed the order, or the group of guests, they confirmed the order. So maybe they ordered 1 fish, 1 chicken, 2 salads, and some desserts, right? So this is the order. This is the result of this business process. Look at this. I'm not talking about any Ruby code, about Rails code. We are just at the business perspective level. And why is that important? So we are detecting crucial events. Those are events. Guest confirmed order, and the previous one, guest entered the restaurant. Those are events, and maybe guest was seated at the table. Now you can imagine the important events at the timeline of what is happening from left to right. And now we can visualize the flow of the business process. We are not thinking about the data. We are not thinking about the order itself or the restaurant as we would do in a typical Rails application. We have a much richer vocabulary because we are no longer limited to just CRUD, create, read, update, destroy. So this is the API of all the ActiveRecord classes. So we are thinking in terms of business perspective. And those, this kind of events, business events, they will not change across the restaurants that much. There will be some subtle changes. Some restaurants will have a different idea of how it is to take the order, how it is to lead the people to the table. So they will be slightly different, and we may want to allow this customization in our project. But the main events, they are the same. So we are now talking about events. And when we have the events, today I want to teach you 2 heuristics about thinking in events at the business level. So we are talking about analysis level, but this is leading us to the architecture of our application. So I want to make you think about architecture of Rails applications in terms of events today. And the first heuristic is called the Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four is a heuristic where it contains 4 numbers: 0%, 50%, 100%, and 150%. What do they mean in practice? And they are amazing because they are helping us cover scenarios which we usually would skip when we were using the traditional level of Rails or of analysis of a Rails application. So 0% is the kind of opposite of the event, of the original event. So we are talking about guests entered the restaurant. And what happens if no guests entered the restaurant, let's say for the last 3 hours? This is like the situation where that's like a negative version of that event, right? So this event didn't happen. And is it important for the business to know about it? Are the managers interested in such situations? Maybe they do. Maybe they want to be supporting such situation because probably there's an anomaly for a restaurant to be for 3 hours without guests, and the manager is sitting in some room and they don't see it. They need to be notified, but because maybe something bad happened outside of the restaurant, maybe someone forgot to close the door, maybe people entered the restaurant by left immediately, and because our waiters are very rude, or there's something really, really broken in terms of how the restaurant looks like today, maybe something smells, maybe, I don't know, there might be multiple of reasons, but it is an important scenario, one that would be probably missed in many traditional approaches to developing a restaurant application. So this is the 0% idea of an event. And then there is the 50% idea of the event. So the event kind of happened, but not really and not fully. So in our case, with the guest entering the restaurant, maybe they entered the restaurant, but then maybe they left the restaurant immediately for whatever reason. Again, someone was rude to them. Maybe they didn't like the atmosphere. So do the businesses want to know about such events? Do they maybe want to have a report of how many people leave immediately? I'm not sure, but I think that if I run a restaurant, and this is like a dream for many people, so for me, it's also kind of a dream. I would like to have a restaurant, but it's very difficult. I would like to know, because with analytical approach, you can guess that maybe at this level of our, almost like a marketing funnel, people are not converting, right? So if people enter and then they leave, that's not something that you want to have at restaurants. Maybe it was full and that's okay for you, but maybe there are some other reasons. So this is a 50% event. So 100% event is obviously just the normal version of the event. This event happens. So the guest entered the restaurant and everything is fine. But 150% is the situation where the event happens even too much. So maybe there was the guest entered, but we can't really handle this guest. The capacity of our restaurant doesn't allow us. So this is the situation that maybe you also want to note, because maybe it will trigger your thinking, or maybe we can rearrange the restaurant so that we can put more people, or maybe we can buy some more room, some more space. So this will give you some thinking, and maybe on some reports, this will be okay. Just a short break for a water sip. I hope you can still hear me well and see me well. So just for you to remember this rule, the Fantastic Four heuristic. This is a relatively new technique that I learned from Mariusz Gil, one of the event experts, so the best event experts that I know, who work with businesses exactly relying on events. Okay, the second heuristic, once we have the events, is the Sherlock Holmes rule. I invented this name. There's probably a better name for that, and someone else probably came with the same idea. When you take an event like guest entered the restaurant, we want to investigate, like a Sherlock Holmes, what happened before. So we want to dig deeper. Why did they enter the restaurant? What triggered them? We want to learn about that. So maybe because people just walk on the street, we're in a good location, and they just walk on the street before the restaurant, they see the restaurant, they're hungry, and they entered the restaurant. So this is easy. But maybe you will detect that people visited the nearby museum. And maybe this will trigger you an idea that you may want to put some leaflets, the small offers, on the museum, talk to them whether they agree, and just leave it. So this will give you some ideas. And I know I'm taking you outside of the code base, really far away, but if you understand those concepts very well, you will be very well aligned with the marketing and sales people from restaurants, and they will see and feel in the application you're working on that you understand their problems, because their problems are not really how the code is constructed under the hood. They just want to they want to have a very intuitive UI, for example, and this will always leak. Your design will always leak to the UI, whether you want it or not, whether you build some layer of abstraction or not. It will always show somewhere that you are thinking in this way or not. Okay, now let's go to the code. What are events in the code? Just normal classes. They are data structures. So guest entered, guest confirmed order with some dishes and drinks as the arguments. So nothing really fancy, it's just a data structure. There are many schools of thinking in events. Some people prefer big events, some people prefer small events in terms of the data they grab. The guest confirmed order, this is also an important event. So let's go back to the situation where we are taking the orders. The waiter agrees with the clients, with the guests, that they are ordering this and this and this. And what the waiter does is that he takes the note, he or she, they take the note and they go to the kitchen, right? They give the note, the order, to the chef. And the chef now is responsible for executing in the kitchen stuff. So they are actually preparing the orders. So what is the note? The note is the event here. So we are communicating with messages. So events and messages, very similar names, but we are between those two places, we are communicating with events. So this is how the events can look like in the code. It can be more complicated, but this is basically the simple idea. And now we can detect what are the departments in the business. So I already mentioned some of them, and the events are in a way helping us detecting where things communicate. So I told you about the situation where the waiter brings the note, the order note, to the kitchen, because this is how the departments communicate in the real world. And the dining room is one department, and the kitchen is the second department. And they are communicating through this note, and maybe they communicated back somehow. Maybe they're ringing a bell. Maybe they're using some kind of electronical signals to say, or just the chef says the dishes are ready, or take the starters are ready. So maybe it's one event, maybe it's 3 events, but they are communicating with events, right? and this should work. This should work for them. So once you detect those departments, and so what is the other department? The department might be the entrance, the bar and the bartender, and glasses and drinks and so on. The entrance is all about making people to wait, and so there's like what you can detect in those departments in such a simple business like restaurant is that people they almost like speak different languages. So the kitchen, they talk about ingredients, how long to cook. They have their own way of, even their own way of recruiting the people, completely different vocabulary. While the waiters, the bartender, they have some, like the bartenders should specialize in drinks. The waiters should know about the offer. So in a way, dining room, you can also look like at dining room, like a marketing and sales perspective being mixed together in one room, because the waiter presents the offer, which is all marketing is about. Marketing is about presenting the offer to the clients, and sales means like, okay, let's make the deal, let's agree on the order, and then there's payments when they pay. So it's like sales, marketing, and payments together in one room, and one huge domain called, like one huge department around it is the dining room. So detecting those the departments in the business, and we can make them Ruby modules too. So I showed how to make events as Ruby code, and now the departments are also Ruby code. So very, very thin and simple. There are no implementations here, but on the left side, you can see the module called sales. They have some concepts like group offer, maybe they organize a party in the restaurant. There is a module called kitchen, so it's a department, and they have chef, they have cooks, maybe they have some ingredients, they have some other parts. So they're completely separate concepts, abstractions, business elements of the whole situation. Then there is a bar with the bartender, a drink, a menu of drinks. So again, quite a separated part. And similarly as in the real world, so in the real world, the kitchen, they keep their ingredients in freezers, for example, right? So they have their own storage, while the dining room, maybe they have some plates, or maybe they have some menu, a table with menus or something like this. So they have a different idea and different needs for storages, which is very important, because this leads us to the situation where we may want to think that different departments have different data storages, or at least we can separate them. Okay, so what about reports? Because we started with reports, but now we are back at reports. So like I didn't mention them really. So here is what is happening with reports, and I took the sale report. So the sale report is showing the number of sales, and it's grouped by some kind of date. So, well, just when the sale was made. How can we implement it? So this is where you can see I didn't mention Rails so far. I didn't mention ActiveRecord specifically, but this is the place, this is the area of the code base where ActiveRecord actually shines. It's great, it's amazing, and it's almost like it's created for reports. So that's why we are so great at looking at those tables of screenshots, and Rails developers can create really amazing code bases just to display this thing. What we are less good at is to separate the thinking. So each report is actually a different part of the application. It could be totally separated. And at first, when I heard this rule that you can separate, and maybe you should separate your reports from each other, that maybe they shouldn't talk to the same data tables, for me, at first, it sounds crazy. But then I realized that I usually spend a lot of time on optimizing the reports, because the reports are very often joining different data from different tables. And in this approach, where you have those reports as modules, you are going into the direction of denormalizing the data. So you will just grab, and you will basically have two tables, nothing else. The restaurant tables, but it will be called probably sales restaurants, is just to know what are the restaurants, because we are in multi-tenancy application. So by the way, tomorrow is a great talk from Tomek about multi-tenancy. So we are just displaying these two tables, and that's all. So we can denormalize. And even some very, very complicated reports, like this one, maybe is not really easily visible, but each report will be always just one table, or maybe maximum two tables. So no joins. We want to denormalize the data whenever the change is happening. And obviously, each report is a Ruby module with their own namespace ActiveRecord model. So they contain their own ActiveRecord models. And you can see probably now that now the got class called restaurant, now it will be in many different places, but with a very small parts. So it will be much more smaller scope. And it's much, much easier to test this way. It's much easier to just look at the code and see that basically it works, and it's very performant. And the only difficult part is how to integrate that. So let me show it to you. So exactly how do read models, how those reports, I call them read models, how those read models are connect to departments if they can't access their database. We just talked about this idea that we shouldn't grab to each other's databases, and the same idea applies to the different reports. So how can a report know without accessing the main database or some other databases or some other data tables? And they communicate via events. So you can see now this is probably the most complicated piece of code in this presentation. We have this sales report module. It has the restaurant and the sales, so it's a continuation of the same code that was here, but we are now we have extended this with a module method. It can be a class, it can be a service object. There are different names for that, but they all come down to the same situation, that we want to tell the sales report, please register a new sale, and there are some details about it, total amount and tax, probably dates should be here as well. And somewhere above there is the what I call the configuration code, where we want to say there is an event bus, so that where the events are propagating through is a very simple object, it's a very simple publish subscribe pattern. We want to say whenever order is confirmed, we want to update the sales report with a new sale. So very, very simple connection between two places with the code via the event. So order confirmed is the event name. I hope it's clear, because that's basically the whole point of this kind of architecture, of this kind of event-driven architecture. And how are events created in the first place? So now we know how reports are created. We know how they react to the events. So where and how the events are created? They are created and published in the departments. So the departments, again, for example, like sales. And those two pieces of those two screenshots, they're showing the sales. Yes, actually it should be orders, because I think I have confused the sales and orders, but they're basically the same. So let's say it's orders. And there is a method called confirm order, where we load the order from the database in whatever way. For today, let's say it's unimportant. And after we have loaded the order, we just call the method called confirmed. And if everything is fine, so no exception was raised, we just say event bus.publish order confirmed. So we have those events here. Order confirmed is just a class, just a simple, very simple class of data structure. You can implement it with dry struct or whatever you like for such data structures. And there is the order state machine. Again, there are many ways of designing state machines. I just went for the ones where you have different states of different classes, and the transitions are made using the simple objects like confirmed order, cancelled order, and paid order. And so when we call the confirm, we return the confirmed order, where the only transition possible is to pay for the order. But from the sales perspective, payments is important, but from the sales perspective, they are more interested whether the order was confirmed. So we are already updating we are saying that, okay, we are publishing the order confirmed. So in this way, the main code base doesn't know about the reports, and via events, the report is notified. So now you should have the dots connected. You should see the whole big picture here. Again, a break for water. I hope it's clear for you. Feel free to ask questions. At the end, I will answer all the questions. I'm checking how I'm on time. Should be okay. And how it looks like we all love in Rails, the conventions and directories and where to put code in files. So I've prepared very quickly something, and this is just a screenshot from RubyMine. So this is one approach. There are many of them, but the idea is that we like to keep the code at the same level as the Rails application. Another approach would be to keep it almost separate from the application. So the whole concept is that the business code, the department's code, as I called it now, this is separated from Rails. There is no dependency. Look at this. There is no dependency to Rails. You can test it without even inheriting from the Rails test case, right? Or the active support test case. So this way, especially the department. So here is the main directory of a Rails application, and now I have a restaurant, which is the name of the actual business idea behind it, and I have a file or a directory for each of the departments. Often I have a file because some of the departments are very small, so I can keep them in one file. And the reports, they belong to read models directory. Sometimes I keep them as part of the application app directory, and that's because actually reports, they can be coupled to Rails a little bit. So because they are using ActiveRecord, right? So they can have Rails as dependency, or they can have ActiveRecord as dependency, because they are very application specific. So while this code here, dining room, kitchen, marketing, sales, it should be almost unaware of the context of where it's called from, whether it's a Rails app or maybe it's a command line application or whatever else. Obviously, we will rarely create such other clients, but that's the idea here, that we can create it separately. We still use, obviously, controllers, views. We still use models, but mostly at this level of reports. I mean, ActiveRecord models. It's just the whole integration with us and Rails is very, very simple. And for example, this kind of architecture makes upgrading Rails code bases very, very simple. And I can say that from an experience of the last 3 years working on a project that was fully built like that. By the way, there is a talk from Szymon, I think it's Thursday or Friday, where he focuses on upgrading Rails from more complicated and not so separated applications like this one, like what kind of problems you want to solve. All right, so I hope this is clear for you as well. How does it impact the actual application? So this is the weird one. This is my observation, that if you have such a granular design, meaning like a very modular design with those events and messages with the application and out of the application, this is helping us a lot in creating a task-based UI. You can Google this concept. It's the concept where the UIs are less about forms and submitting forms. It's more like, okay, we just tap one button because you want to signal that someone entered the restaurant or something like that. So it's a different way of task-based UI, where you don't confirm the forms. Basically, you don't submit forms. You're just clicking one thing to do one small thing. So your whole application allows making those task-based UIs. And this is why, if you started from scratch with these business processes in mind, there is a bigger chance, probably not proof, but a bigger chance that you will be more successful in the market. People who are running the restaurants, they will understand that you understand the business, and even if they have some changes that they want to make, it will be much easier for you to make them, because your architecture is basically the events. This is the main idea here. So to summarize what was shown today, and what is the goal, so how you can start your next Rails application, assuming you obviously liked it. You will watch the business processes. That's the first rule. Then you will detect the crucial events. And then you will start with modules per departments. You will have the business logic separated from Rails. You will have a module for each report. And each department will have their own data storage, and each report will have their own data storage. It doesn't mean that suddenly you need to create a different database for everything. It's just you will keep the conceptual separation, never look at each other's tables. By the way, there will be, for example, with reports, some of the reports are very tabular, as we have seen, and those reports are really well designed to be stored in a relational database, the ones that we usually use. But maybe with some other views in the application, some other reports will have some very embedded data. And in this case, maybe the document databases will be better. There will be the talk at this conference by Mirek. Mirek will tell you about his talk will be more in details about Rails views in such spirit, in Rails reports or Rails read models. And he will tell more about how it can be used. So for some reports, it might be fine to use a normal relational database, while for some other views, you will use Mongo, and that's fine. You can have the best from all the worlds. And then the consequences here is that maybe not needed always, that maybe you will start working on the next application without typing Rails new, even though you know you will end up with Rails new, because if you have this directory structure like this one, or maybe you will even create this as a gem, then you just plug your business code into your Rails application, and it's possible. You can start with Rails new, there's nothing wrong with that, but maybe you want to just start with the business parts, detect the crucial events, maybe play with them, and only later integrate with the Rails application. Because the Rails application, in the end, what it does, it provides the ActiveRecord for reports, and it provides all the HTTP wiring and HTTP layer and some security. And because Rails does bring some value here, so for Rails views, the way you're presenting the Rails views, it's all very compatible with this kind of architecture. And by the way, this will have super fast tests for business logic because it's decoupled from everything else, but also it's decoupled from Rails itself and from the gems. You don't need to load all the gems that you will use, and it's fine to use gems from your for whatever else you want to use gems for, some infrastructure stuff, sending SMS or emails or something else. So it's still fine. You will use those Rails gems from Rails, and Rails will provide you the adapters to the third parties, for example, but it will be separated from your business logic. If you want to explore those topics further, you may want to read about event-driven architectures in general. The idea of thinking in terms of events, and the idea of thinking that events are the architecture of your application, and how to come up with the events in the businesses you work on. The best way is to somehow be together with the client, with the users, with actual users of your application, the people who play the roles in the business processes. And you can do it online using, for example, Miro as a tool, or you can do it live if you once the whole current situation will be more normal. It's called event storming. So developers together with business people sit together in a way, and they discuss what are the events. And events is a vocabulary that business people do understand. And then there is a service-oriented architecture, which fits very well with event-driven architectures, and there is a really good theory behind it, so you may want to explore that. Reports, I call them reports here. So today I didn't want to introduce a big number of buzzwords. I wanted to make it as simple as possible. But the truth is, the reports are actually CQRS read models. You may want to explore this topic if you like the idea of reports with denormalized data, especially when they are triggered by events. Today I use the word departments, but actually in domain-driven design they are called bounded contexts. I just wanted to use a simpler name closer to business. So we create modules per departments. If you want to read more, explore the topics of domain-driven design, especially the bounded context. Business processes, they are implemented as process managers. Again, an idea from DDD. So those are the situations where you take the order from the client, and then the whole kitchen can start their business process. So their business process is split into 3 phases: the starters, the main dishes, and the desserts. And you can kind of track what events has happened already, and then you know at which level of the business process you are in. So there's a pattern to implement it as a process manager. And again, this can be you can find it in any DDD materials. The failure scenarios, for example, the users were seated at the table, but then they left. This is like a failure scenario. So maybe when they're seated at the table, the event guest seated on the table, maybe it triggered the kitchen to prepare some. Sometimes they prepare something for start. But then when they leave, you want to create a saga, so you want to compensate. You want to go to the kitchen and say, oh, by the way, don't bother anymore. Those 4 people, they actually left for some reason. So those are sagas, when you want to revert the failure scenario. And then we didn't talk about how to load the business objects from the database. We can do it using just ActiveRecord if we like. Very often, if you are combining event-driven architectures with this kind of business thinking, you can use event sourcing, which is a bit more advanced topic, but this is something you can explore. So not enough time for me to cover all the topics. I hope I at least gave you some glance of how it can work together. And I'm talking from an experience of the last 3 years spent on a project where it was only about that. But overall, it took me 8 years to get to the point, I think 8 or 7 years, when Mirek first taught me about how events can work. So it took me 8 years. I can't really combine 8 years into one short presentation, even though I would love to. I have nothing to hide. So my question to you is whether you learned something useful today, whether this, how much time, 45 minutes, whether it was useful for you. Please let me know in the comments whether it was worth the time. Okay, So let me proceed. The whole conference is free for you because it's, in a way, it's sponsored by an online course that we have created, and it's called Rails Architect Masterclass. And today we are opening the sales of the 4th edition of Rails Architect Masterclass. This is my fantastic drawing skills shown here on iPad using pencil. This is in a nutshell what this Rails Architect Masterclass is about. So it's taking you from the point A where your Rails application code is usually ending up as a, not maybe artistic, but not perfectly modularized piece of code. And I want to get you to point B where your Rails application is almost like put in the boxes. So I hope the directory structure, which was shown here, it does resemble that you know where to put codes now. So instead of dot classes, you now have boxes, and the whole idea is much, much better. So those colors represent different boxes. There should be more of those colors, but let's say this is like a metaphor here. So the Rails Architect Masterclass is $799, but with this code, and you can buy it on railsarchitects.com. It's only available within the next 7 days. And then we close the sales window. For the next at least 6 months, it will not be available to buy. So we're creating this kind of edition where we have groups of students, and we go with them and we lead them. And only today, so this is the 4th edition, only today we have a special price. So if you use at the checkout, if you use Masterclass 4 as the code, the coupon code, you will get $100 off. So the price will be $699. I hope I didn't mess it in anywhere here. So what is it about? So who's it for, first of all? It's for Rails developers. It's Ruby developers without Rails will also learn a lot, but some modules are specifically about Rails integrations. So Rails developers, maybe CTOs, maybe people who are entrepreneurs, but also with developer bias, so they can work on that. Those are the topics covered. Surprisingly, everything here was kind of like the continuation of this talk. I hope I didn't want to hide anything from you. This is as much as I can show you within 45 minutes. But all those topics that you need to understand, I hope you got the basics. But all the things are explained in the video class. So we are not video producers. We are not the best in producing the video. But the RKNC team, which was the team behind the Rails Architect Masterclass, we have those 7-8 years of trying out those ideas with their big Rails legacy applications. So we hope we have presented it very well. We're using different ways, different personalities. Many people recorded the videos. Apart from the videos, there are homeworks, there are live calls, there is access to archives if you join. So you will see you can access the live calls from the first 3 editions. So you will see many of the questions that you might have already answered. So there is an online video class. There's access to Slack community. So there's already, I don't know exactly, 130 or 120 students who participated in the first 3 editions. There's access to book, and the new thing which appear only in this edition. And by the way, if you're watching this and you're one of the previous edition students, you just contact our support and you will inform how to apply. You obviously get it all for free, so you will get access to the 4th edition. So that's what we do. We let all the previous students from previous editions attend the next editions as well if they like it, because usually there is something new. So there's a book called Domain-Driven Rails, which is part of this package. You will get a book, and the Domain-Driven Rails is all about DDD in Rails. The new thing in this year is the audio. So Agnieszka, our assistant, she worked hard on extracting the audio from the videos, and now you can listen to many of the videos are explaining stuff. And some of the videos, they're not using slides because it's just an explanation. So audio is totally fine for those of them. Many of the videos are about screencasts, so those of them are not really as audio. So you can just choose which ones of them. So this is something new. You can listen to the class while riding the car, the bus, or going bicycle. Or my favorite way of consuming classes or online courses is via going to the gym, and then when I'm running, I will watch it. And the second new thing, and that's I think is a game changer in the way we're consuming the online classes, because maybe I'm similar to some of you that I buy online classes, but I don't really finish them. But for those online classes where they provide the mobile application, I see that I have much more progress. So the mobile application changes a lot, and thanks to Teachable, our online education platform here, they provided the mobile client, and we have integrated with them in this edition. So again, thanks to Agnieszka for doing the work. you will get the instruction how to access the course from Teachable. There are 13 modules, so in a way there's 13 weeks of work, which I know can be overwhelming, especially so you buy with a big price, and then you buy 13 modules, and it's like overwhelming, and you would like to be in control of it maybe more. So let me just present you that the idea that the first 4 modules are most crucial. So the learning about watching the first 4 modules, 2 of them are shown here, will give you all the foundations needed. And all the other modules are about other specific topics, but you can choose which one is most interesting for you. So if you have a huge part of your application's integration with frontends, maybe you want to watch the module about frontends. For example, we have a whole module about payments, like the whole department of payments being explained by our payment experts, Szymon and Jakub. So maybe you would like to watch this one. So those are the first 2. Then there is the tactical DDD and patterns. So for example, CQRS and DDD at the code level, event sourcing. And then there is backend architecture, more in-depth explanations of difficult stuff like process managers, for example. Those are the biggest ones. So process managers is really huge and important. So if you join today, if you take the code and buy today, there is only 5 hours left to buy today, I think. I'm sorry about the time zones. I'm always confusing them. But if you join today, there's already first module available. You will receive the book. You will have the Slack account created. You will have the Teachable account created immediately. Most of the stuff is automated. Whatever is not automated, Agnieszka is doing that as quick as she can. And then we will reveal the new modules every Friday, and you will get access to the second module so this Friday you will get the second module immediately. We do it on Fridays because now we want to let people watch it over the weekends. We know that usually this is the time where you can have it. Oh, I see already someone bought it. Thank you for your trust. Then 17th of July, you get access to the 4th module, if my calendar thinking is right, and it's not always right. So in a way, like in 2.5 weeks from now, maybe you will be, so that's not probably less overwhelming. You will be after your 4th module if you're watching quickly. And after that, so we treated that after the first 4 modules, it's much easier for us to help you, because the first 4 modules, most of the answers are provided. And after you watch 4 modules and you still have questions, I'm very happy to personally go for a call with you and explain directly to you your questions, if you have any and they were not answered before. So after the 4th module, you can ask for that. Some examples, for example, this is the screencast or video I recorded. This is the kind of quality you can expect. What to do when there are no domain experts. Sometimes it's very difficult to understand the business when the client doesn't tell you much. Sometimes you just have to go, as I did here, and I went to I think it was an accounting forum, and I learned accounting. So you need to go and find I call it the domain safari. So you go there, and this is the video explaining this technique. Very useful techniques for many of you. This is, for example, this is Mirek. So Mirek will have a talk about fast Rails views, so the reports. And Mirek explains what is CQRS and how to speed up your application by implementing the CQRS pattern. So you can see the split between the read being very simple layer and the write, which is a bit more complicated. This is here Pavel. Pavel's specialization in our course is process managers and Saga, and he recorded really nice and a lot of videos actually. Some of the videos are very short. We call them, what is the education, nano education or something like this. So we want to have small bits, but some of the videos where the topics are very difficult, we explain in depth in much longer videos. So here Pavel just answers the usual confusion, how people understand what is process manager, what is Saga. So this is actually a very short video. So we don't want to spread it for too long, but also we don't take things too short when they are more complex. And this is from a module called microservices at infra. So we are talking a lot about the very important topic of when to go microservices, when not to. There is no clear answer. So back to the title page, it's the $799 price for today only. Sorry, for today only there is a 100% off. Using this code masterclass 4. And I think that's it. Thank you for your patience with this sales offer here. I think we now have the time for Q&A, so I will switch to actually see what is happening here. Okay, now I see the whole chats. Oh my God, 239 people are out until this point. That's more than expected. Thank you very much for your trust here. So I hope you liked it. And now I think I have to go through the comments to try to answer them. But feel free to ask the questions again. I will try to. Okay, I'm just scrolling. So please be patient, and I will answer whatever was asked here. Lots of comments from. Is this about DDD? So I hope I answered this. Yes, it is a lot about DDD, but I already also learned some hard lessons from DDD. So I believe in our master class, overall, we only take the good parts from DDD. So I, for example, I really like the idea of departments, of the bounded context. And I don't like many of the ideas behind specific ways of implementing aggregates, for example. So in the masterclass, there is a whole module called aggregates in the masterclass, where we present, I think, 7 different implementations of aggregates. Because the aggregate root pattern has some drawbacks as well. So we want to take the best from DDD. Great talk. Greetings from Berlin, Anna. Thank you, Anna. Yes, DDD. Yeah, I see that many of you answered actually the questions. So, okay. Sebastian. Sebastian is one of the students from the previous edition. Do you want to record events, even such popular like the page viewed or search performed? It sounds like too much of events to handle process now. So I think in the masterclass we addressed this somewhere. We call those events analytical events, and they are different. So page viewed or search performed. For some businesses, it's important to know how many people did search, but sometimes maybe they want just a counter. Sometimes they need all the details. So depending on the situation, they may want to have this data stored. But obviously, when there is like too much of it, the storage might be a problem. However, from what I see, people are having millions of events, even hundreds of millions of events in Postgres databases, and still fine for them. Many people from Brazil, thank you. I'm not sure why we are so popular in Brazil, but great. I тут русские. I can understand, I can read Russian, so hello to all the Russian, Ukrainians, Belarusian people who write Cyrillic. I can read you at least. I can't really speak, but I have visited Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine last year, and amazing places. Okay, looking for next questions. I will skip some of them, but if you think it's important I skipped, feel free to Artyom Kirienko, why not in lib directory? So I suppose it's a good question, and I don't want to enforce that, okay, what I suggested was best. It's just, I like the idea of Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob says, when you open your code base, you should know what the application is about. And usually when you open a Rails code base, all you know is a Rails, but you don't know what's the business exactly. So that's why I really like the idea of putting it at the highest level. But I'm totally okay with the lib directory. As long as it's like separated, then it's fine. In this structure, do you use ActiveRecord models? Yes, in the reports, so the read models, and sometimes in the departments, I can use ActiveRecord just to store the object. So, for example, the order. And so, yeah, so I'm just using ActiveRecord, but in a much less scope than usually you would use an ActiveRecord. So probably I'm not using callbacks, I'm not using validations that much, because all these things, they will land somewhere else. Lucas, a great talk so far. Thank you. Not sure how the publisher subscriber works or the order state manager. I'm not sure if I understand the question. So whenever we change the state of the order, I showed you some code where we first change the state of the order. So we called a method, so it's changed the order, and then we publish the event. It was a bit simplistic code, but the idea is that those events can always be reproduced, and then from those events, you can build the next stage of the next state of the order. About the simple CRUDs, how can you create these files for an API REST? So you can still have some parts of the REST application where you can just fully rely on CRUD and ActiveRecord. For example, in the restaurant application, maybe the menu part where you just want to present the offer. So there's like the dishes being split into starters, main dishes, salads, drinks, and so on. So maybe it's a very, very simple CRUD and you don't really want to have anything fancy around it. In that case, the CRUDs are great, and I wouldn't go in the events direction. But you can imagine some business scenario where many people are allowed to change the menu, and for example, but there is a business rule for this restaurant or for some restaurants that the menu never should consist from more than 20 positions, because that's what usually the based restaurants are. They have really narrow offer. So it's easy to add new items, but maybe you have a business process to review. Once someone reaches 20 items in the menu, maybe you want to review it. So there might be a business process around it. If there is, I would go with events. If there is really none, then just CRUD. Hey, Andrzej, say hello to AlphaCon IT team from Brazil. So I'm saying hello to AlphaCon IT. I'm really happy that whole teams are watching me. It's amazing to hear that my current Rails apps actually meet all your points. Sebastian, you are a very good student, except I would start it with Rails new. Obviously, you already knew quite a lot when you joined, so it's not all our effort, but you were a very active student, and it was a pleasure to have you at the previous edition. I always found the bottleneck is not technology-wise, but the way that Rails developers learned to build application. So Rafael, I think we are agreeing here. That's why I presented a bit wider perspective today. I hope I was at least slightly successful with that. So I wanted to show that we should reach out to business people, because it's not all about technology, and it is about understanding the business goals. And what I see from developers working this way is that they will be more focused on business goals when they understand business. So there is this myth that the developers, they don't care about business. I don't think it's true. They were just never allowed to care about business. They were never taught or trained how to think in business goals. So I think using those techniques of event storming, for example, which is very phenomenal, like even the technology radar from ThoughtWorks, they presented event storming as a technique that people should adopt. So this is something really, really great. I just showed a surface of this idea, how to detect business. Do you have some suggestion to help out a team to do the transition from Rails is God to object-oriented design? Let's talk about your group offer from the masterclass. I really believe what we have created. I wouldn't be so confident here. I really believe that Rails Architect Masterclass is something that helps teams, and I really believe that this will help the teams make a transition. And I didn't mention on the sales page, I forgot. If there's at least 3 people from one team, you will have a discount. I think it's 10%, and then you will also have a separate Slack channel. So maybe you can so we are inviting you to Slack, but for those of you who are parts of the teams, you will get access to us like within a scope of your team only. So if you have very project-specific questions, you can be you can use this channel. Anton Grigoriev, hello Anton. Having a restaurant module to combine classes is a very good idea, but the restaurant itself also could be a class with a number of properties. How would you organize this case in the code? So definitely the restaurant will be an object, or will be a class in all of those departments in a way. So the kitchen may want to know some idea about the restaurant or the dining room and so on. The properties, they will be different per each department. So this technique of splitting into departments or into bounded context, that would be the proper naming here. This comes from domain-driven design. This is one of the good things from domain-driven design, as I believe. So this allows us to have those smaller classes. So even though we still have the restaurant class, maybe in many different departments, it will be in all bounded contexts, it will have a different set of properties. And the number of properties will be so one of the problems of many Rails code bases is that you often pass a bunch of parameters from one object to another, and often we have primitive obsession, so there is lots of IDs, and in this design you are limiting this because it's always at the scope of one department. There's much less. Okay, I think I scrolled to the place where you are saying that, because I didn't show it when I asked if it was worth it. So thank you, Sun Kanmi. Slavicus, thanks. I will not go through all of them, but thank you for confirming. Here, Tomasz answered, yes, exactly. You would have a duplicate restaurant. So Tomasz is from Arkansas, and Tomasz will have a talk on multi-tenancy tomorrow. And you want to attend this talk because with Tomasz, I worked with on a multi-tenancy application for almost 3 years together. And there we went with a row-level, what's the professional name? Row-level multi-tenancy. But in the next project, Tomasz made existing application multi-tenant. So it wasn't multi-tenant, and it was an existing successful business application, a very old, I think 12 years code base. And Tomasz made it multi-tenant using PostgreSQL schemas. So he is the right person to show you the differences. So please note at the agenda, Tomasz, and his talk tomorrow. I think it will be later than today. We try to allow people from different time zones to join for different talks. Good approach to prepare for development. Some tutorials would be great. By the way, if you can't afford the Rails Architect Masterclass, or for whatever reason you don't want to buy it, the blog.arkansas.com, the Arkansas blog, it does offer you many free resources to start with. Hello, Ben. You just confirmed all that Arkansas already taught me. Thank you. That's really nice. Piotr, thanks. I like the idea of soft introducing advanced architectural concepts using well-known business concept, department. Yeah, the concept of using departments is something that I learned is better at the educational level. I think I accidentally scrolled too much. What do you think about using modules also to expose who are the stakeholders, the way the team will know who the change will impact? Chef's kitchen. I would do it the other way around. So you're saying about exposing. I like the idea of roles very much. Actually, in the Rails Architect Masterclass, there's a whole implementation of aggregates using roles. And it is also accessible as a Rails repository on GitHub Arkansas/aggregates. If you go to GitHub Arkansas/aggregates, you will find those implementations. They are open source now. But I would keep those roles as part of the department. So it would be more like kitchen chef, right? And I would also separate roles from people. Like, for example, the waiter. This is a funny situation because a waiter is he or she can play the role of a marketer because she presents the offer, the menu, but at the same time, immediately after, she confirms the order. So he or she's now the role of payments. So roles are more important than their actual position. So waiter is a position, but he can play many roles. And as a position, maybe it belongs to the dining room department, but it's more important what are the roles. Okay, that was this one. Looks like CQRS is a very popular topic these days. Yeah, I think, Artyom, I think it's a very growing technique. It was underrated, I think, for a long time. Are you familiar with Eventide? Yes, I'm familiar with Eventide, and we shared lots of ideas with the people from Eventide. I think where they're specializing in is less about Rails, at least so far, but more about microservices and immediately go microservices. So probably they have their direction of going with Event ID. As an event storage, they're using the PostgreSQL mechanism, I think. As the last time I checked, I learned a lot from Scott and from Nathan. We share the same ideas about event sourcing, I think. They're probably less happy about some ideas from DDD, but we are also not huge fans of some of the ideas from DDD. So Eventide, I personally learned a lot. As a tool, so we created Rails Event Store. It wasn't mentioned today because I don't really want, this is free, but I don't want to like sell you the idea of using our framework or something. It's not easy, but it's also not difficult to create your own PubSub. Eventide allows you to build a PubSub which uses Postgres under the hood. We use Rails Event Store, but we are mostly targeting Rails monolithic application, and we are mostly trying to help you with the idea of modules, while Eventide goes full on with microservices. What about communicating events between microservices written in different languages? So This is obviously possible, and if you are in a situation where you need to do it, I would say it's probably, if you don't need to do it, don't go there, because it's just the whole complexity of different languages and serialization, deserialization, communicating via external cues. This really adds up to your whatever you need to do every day. So I personally wouldn't go there without the need, but if you need to go there, you can use some external tools for the whole communication via events. So it's possible. From the philosophical perspective, I would advise you to watch Fred George talks. Amazing personality in the IT industry, and he has this talk called Anarchy of Microservices, or Microservices Anarchy. He explains how they work in different languages using these kinds. We try to prefer Ruby with Rails, and this is like my experience. I don't have much experience. I've had some experience with events using microservices, but they were all using Ruby, and we were using a specialized version of Rails Event Store to do it. There is a mistake on the Rails masterclass page. Oops. Oh, sorry about that, and thanks for noting. We will fix that. Sebastian, yep, I finished the first, I believe, and third edition. Totally recommend. Thank you. That's a nice testimonial. What about practical part of the? There's no continuation. What do you love about Rails nowadays? So that's a generic question, obviously, but I am still a fan of Rails. And while there are many points where I disagree with DHH, for example, I see the benefits of having such a charismatic leader, and I have some different ideas how to architecture complex business Rails applications, but for the simpler ones, the Rails way as DHH advocates them are fine. What do you love about Rails? So I really love, and I think we should appreciate the community. We have really wonderful communities, and we start to appreciate it more once we look at the other communities and how they behave to each other, I think, and what values they have. I think the Rails community shines here with the approach to testing, for example, and the openness to alternatives. For example, like there's a bunch of movements, so the Eventide was mentioned, where they have very similar approach to us in terms of the architectures. But there is, for example, Nick Sutterer with the Trailblazer approach, so it's a different kind of techniques. There is Piotr Solnica with the DryerB ecosystem. There is the Hanami team and Hanami people. So all of this is really amazing, and I like it that we learn from each other, we inspire each other, and this is what I like about Rails. And I still think Rails is probably the most effective framework for starting Rails applications. So for startups, and as you can see, for business applications, I think is a really great choice. And the best part about Rails for me is still Ruby. And I believe Ruby is really most readable. And I find it very important to be able to show Ruby code to business people sometimes. Are the homework from the course reviewed from the Arkansas team? Yes, we review all the homeworks. At the beginning, when there is usually more of them, there might be a little bit of delay, but we do our best to review all of them. Sometimes we will also review and record the review so other people can see the review. So, and there is a special module for all the homework recordings. And I see it as a value for others to see. And people help each other in the masterclass. For example, Sebastian, who is active here in the comments, was helping other people, for example. So this is very, very common. Let me just switch to this slide because it's more professional to leave it like this. And again, I reminder this code is only available now. Probably that's our rule, that the first webinar or the first talk is with the code. Could you please elaborate on how an event bus works in the context of a Rails application, which we normally think as being RESTful? There's not much difference, because what makes things RESTful is, I would say, at the Rails controller level. So I see REST as the HTTP layer abstraction. So you can do at the controller level whatever you like. From the reports, you return data in whatever data structure the controller expects it. So it can be more RESTful friendly, or it can be more GraphQL friendly, for example. There is nothing incompatible here between GraphQL and this approach. Just the GraphQL would be just one layer above. and the mutations. From GraphQL or from RESTful, you would send those posts or puts. They are handled at the controller level, and under the hood, they will be routing to the department's code, right? So that's the idea. And sometimes you would have a situation where a Rails form object contains lots of fields, which under the hood actually translates into many calls to many different departments. So there's a slight bit of mismatch, but there are easy solutions for that, where you just introduce the command pattern and you split your form data into several commands, and then you issue those commands, and then they are directed to the departments. If there is feedback. So Ivan, that was a question connected with this one. So yes, the homeworks are reviewed and there is feedback. So we will point you in the right direction. What about practical parts of the masterclass? Which outcome? So you will create probably your side projects with those techniques explained in the masterclass. So in your homework, you can use your side project, or you can just follow our recommendations. And so you can choose. Like some of the people, they prefer to just watch the videos and ask questions and attend calls. Some of the people are more like, I want to do the homeworks because I need to go through my hands, through my keyboard. And there are the homeworks, they do support it. I'm more like, I think I'm learning more when I try it. But some people learn more by watching. Do you think it's real? Alexander Shapalov, hello. Do you think it's real to refactor big legacy Rails up in DDD? I think it's real to be very close. Like with one project which we inherited from another team many years ago, we are almost there, but there's never like, no, it's not a business goal itself to go into DDD, right? So you never know where exactly is the right point to stop. But when there are new features introduced, we try to, when it makes sense, we make them departments, we make them bundled context, we make grid models. But for some of the existing features, if they are not requiring any changes, there's probably not much benefits from the business perspective to refactor them. So some of them are left untouched. Ideally, we would like to probably have all of them refactored to big legacy, to DDD, but it doesn't always make sense. Yeah, so Sebastian is talking about the situation. They have their client, and there was a decision to move from standard Rails code to something similar to what we are presenting here in the Rails masterclass. So yeah, they moved to microservices, DDD, and event sourcing. With that's an impressive piece of work by Sebastian and the team. What they did. We finished the course with the whole team, and it helped us make important decisions. And for me personally, definitely paid off. Wow, Sebastian, it sounds almost like you're our ambassador, but I know it's true, so thank you. How an event storming works, how can you facilitate business people to help architect the software? Yeah, how can you convince the people? This is the hard part, especially if it comes from developers. But if you just call a meeting, and the business people often like meetings, and you can just try to have an event storming session. So I assume you have those business people maybe in the same building, and let's assume that for now the Corona situation has been somehow solved and we can be in a physical rooms close to each other. So you put the notes on the wall. That's the default way of doing event storming. I really believe that the online editions of event storming are also useful. So when there was a lockdown, I've had 3 successful event storming sessions with a bunch of people for an interesting project, and I believe it was successful. The outcome was really great. So just Google event storming in Google Images, and you will see, because the pictures will explain more than I can do it with words. And in our masterclass, we do present some techniques for event storming, and they are an important part of the whole process as I think about software development. So they are the beginning. This is one of the important techniques at the beginning of creating software, together with, for example, impact mapping. But impact mapping is outside of the scope of the masterclass. We'll definitely try to convince my current team. So Rafael, if you want some help with convincing, contact me directly, and I will help you with convincing. Slavikus, thanks for an answer. Well, I don't work on any of such projects, and I have more of an academic interest in the field and some good hands-on session to understand how all this works. Okay. Nothing stops you from having restaurant class. You can have nested classes modules. Yes. Yep. So again, vote for applying as a team to the masterclass. Okay, so Sebastian, thank you for being so active. Okay, so Rafael, you already were here. Okay, thank you for recap of masterclass topics. Hello, Evgeny, nice to see you here. I will not read it loudly. Okay, were there more questions here? So some finished project will be an outcome of the practical part of the course. Good to know. Thanks for answer. Okay. Are there any more questions? I'm not sure if I can see. I saw all of them. So if I skipped something, please let me know, and I will answer them. So a reminder: this code is only valid until the end of today, meaning probably the Polish time zone. So it's somewhere about 4 or 5 hours from now. We don't want you to make a spontaneous decision if you were not considering this, so take your time. The whole class is available to buy within the next 7 days, so we start on Tuesday. It will be available to buy until the end of Monday next week. Let me just, so if there's nothing else I can answer, let me just present you the agenda, just a reminder and advertisement. Those are all free talks. I did present you a sales offer, but there's no pressure to buy it. Multi-tenancy in Rails app, PostgreSQL schemas. So Tomasz will focus on schemas in his talk about multi-tenancy. Highly recommended. I will watch the talk as well. And I hope you can learn in which direction to go with the multi-tenancy, especially probably in those concepts which Tomasz was working on, where there was an existing application that was made multi-tenant. So what was previously something like copy per client of an application became more like multi-tenancy environment. And then there is on Thursday, there is Shimon talking about painless Rails upgrades, sharing his recent experiences with upgrades, I think, from some older versions to Rails 6, and what kind of gotchas Shimon discovered. So maybe it will help you if you're still behind. And then on Friday, there's Mirek and simplifying and speeding up your Rails views. So Mirek will go into much more detail about the reports, the read models, and CQRS, much more detail than I was doing this today. Then there is the code review session. So I invited Tomek Stolarczyk. He's a Java developer, actually. And we've had a nice session recently with Tomasz about looking at some Ruby code, or it was a very old Rails code for a very simple from a very simple project, but it was overly complicated. And Tomasz, even though it was his first time looking at the Ruby code, he was very, very quick to find some typical coupling problems and cohesion problems. So while we're talking about the architecture today, this talk or actually the review session by Tomek and me, there will be more. I will try to do more space for Tomek. So I will try to inspire Tomek to do it his way. So in that session we will go at the design level, so more as at the level of how objects communicate between each other. So maybe at the level, for example, of one department, you could say, or if there are no departments, then maybe at the level where there is the low-level communication, or how objects are designed, what are their methods, and whether those methods take dependencies. So there's the problem of coupling. So today there was a lot of coupling problems explained, but there's the problem of cohesion. So those classes where you have methods which they don't seem to have much in common. So the cohesion is not high, and it's better to have high cohesion. So where you can see how those methods they fit together. Okay, there are some more questions. I think my early question was unclear. By RESTful, I meant to emphasize that it is stateless. Normally with a pub/sub pattern, the sub is a callback, but you weren't using, example, a proc to subscribe. We are using procs to subscribe. So there is nothing stateless. So thanks for precising the question. Maybe I didn't get it right. And I think if you want to be stateless, you can be stateless. So those handlers, they can be pure functions. And by the way, we have a whole module, I didn't present in a slide, we have a whole module in the masterclass where we present a functional approach to those concepts. Because if you think about events and if you build your objects from events, building objects from events is event sourcing. Event sourcing is conceptually, in the functional terminology, is a left fold. So you're left fold the events to a state. And then you can, from one state, you can return a new state. So that would be the functional approach. And on GitHub, on rknc/aggregates repository, you will see the functional implementations as well. So, and read models are also, reports can also be thought of as functional because the events are the input and some kind of a data structure. The table of data is the output. The departments are just a namespace for a number of functions. If you like to look at it this way, I really prefer to think in objects, but I do see a lot of value in the functional ideas like immutability and so on. So many of the implementations I was using there are very, very functional in the spirit. So I hope it answers. Tomasz, great idea of the conference and that series of talks. Cannot wait for the upcoming topic. Great, thank you, Tomasz. This masterclass code in Rails 6? Probably not. It was recorded 1 year ago. But there's really not that much. Like, we focus on showing you how you can separate from Rails that much. So there's really not that much from Rails-specific features that we try to use, and we don't want to rely on them because they might change over time. Let me just have water. One concept which we try to explain in the masterclass is that those skills, for example, like DDD and CQRS and event-driven architectures, those are very generic skills. So when you have them, and let's say you are forced to leave the Ruby world to some other world, to Python or somewhere else, you will be able to apply those skills. So I prefer not to rely too much on the frameworks. And even if you use ActiveRecord, like for example, for reports, we don't really use callbacks, we don't really use validations. So again, those are because in Rails, you can divide the skills into the parts where they're Rails specific and less Rails specific, right? So I don't like to rely that much on the frameworks. I love Rails, I love Ruby, but maybe I will need to change someday. Probably not, I hope, but I prefer to have those skills being more generic. Exactly, Rails is implementation detail. That's said by Piotr, who is also a student of one of the editions. Yeah, I think so. That's it. We have 230 people according to my statistics here. I'm really amazed by the number of you who showed up. This is amazing. This proved that exactly the idea of this conference was good. I hope I started this conference well for you. I hope you are attracted to this idea and you will attend the talks tomorrow and over the whole days. Please, if you haven't subscribed to the on the landing page, you have a way of leaving the email. Please leave the email in case something changes. We will get you there. You will be subscribed to the Rails RKNC newsletter. Sorry, Ruby RKNC Ruby newsletter. So, but if you don't like those emails, feel free to unsubscribe after the conference week is over. But if you like it, then you can stay because there is Ruby relevant emails being sent. But for the current week, if you're already a subscriber on the RKNC newsletter, please forgive us that there will be more emails this week, probably something like 2 emails a day. But it's more like for informing you and reminding you about the agenda. I know we're all like overwhelmed of what is happening every day, so we just want to remind you. I don't like those comments appearing. Okay, so thank you, and it's not pre-recorded. Thank you for appearing here. Thank you for those people who already, I see some notifications, who already bought. Thank you for your trust, and see you on the next talks and see you on the masterclass. I will be happy to help you transition your skills from the current level to the Rails architect level. Okay, that's it for me. By the way, the recording will be there on the landing page of the conference. Feel free to share it with your colleagues. It will disappear after the sales week. and later on it will be possible to get it on, but only as a product, so you'll be able to buy it. But for the current week, all the talks will be, the recordings will be available for free. That's it. Thank you very much. I hope you liked it. I did enjoy it from my side. Thank you, and bye.